Good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. It is 6:41. We're calling the regular council meeting to order. Ms. Monroe, if you'd like to call the roll.
Mayor Don Barnard.
Here.
John Merriman.
Here.
Sharon Hendren.
Here.
Charlie Campbell.
Here.
Nicole Shook.
Here.
Bob Orsini.
Here.
Ryan Green.
Here.
Before we get started, council elected tonight to wear red and black in honor of the Tuscarawas Valley School. We are also taking, Ms. Hendren's taking contributions to donate to the school that will be sent to Tuscarawas Valley this week. So if anybody would like to contribute tonight, see Ms. Hendren. So if you could please stand, Pastor Larry Griffin is not here tonight for the invocation. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight. We thank you for all those who have been able to come tonight. We thank you for the city, the mighty things that the city's doing. We ask you to be with everyone up here, everyone in the crowd. We ask you to just be with our first responders, our firefighters, our police officers. Please be with them, keep them safe, everything. Amen. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and start. The first item is actions on minutes for November 8th, 2023. Council, you received these minutes. Does anyone have any changes or alterations to them? Good. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve as written.
Second.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Mayor Barnard.
Yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
Sharon Hendren.
Yes.
The next item we have is correspondence and notice to legislative authority, the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. Mr. Stannard, if you want to go over this and explain what this is.
Sure. I'll reserve the right to defer to the clerk of council because she's dealt with these probably a little bit more than I have. From a procedural standpoint, the Ohio Department of Liquor always reaches out to the city and their respective jurisdictions to kind of go through any new liquor permits that are being floated out or circulated. I'm looking to Teresa to correct me if I'm going wrong, and so far I must be getting it right. So this is another similar situation. There is two options that you have, and that is to request a hearing be held or to not request a hearing be held. And then, so the two items would be, if you don't request a hearing to be held, it's kind of your consent in a way. If you do request a hearing to be held, then there would be a hearing, and they would go through why maybe you have some concerns with this particular application. So what I will tell you with this application is that the current business that is on this particular application is still working through a zoning permit. So a zoning permit has not been issued. I don't necessarily see any issues in giving them a zoning permit. We've got to walk through the parking regulations that are on that particular location, and they share that with a number of other variety of businesses and make sure that that is acceptable. Sign permit was issued all the way back whenever Jim Blair was here. Procedurally, we probably could have done some things differently, but that was already issued, so sign permit wise, there's nothing there that needs to be done. I did get notification from the applicant that the particular site that they are applying for, they got notification from the state of Ohio that that particular site is dry, and so I believe they would have to go to the ballot. If you wanted to confirm that with the applicant specifically, you can, but that's the information that I have, and I'll be available for questions, trying to fill you in as much as I can. That's really all that I have, and then you can try to make a decision based on that information.
Questions for him? So do we need to make a decision tonight if we want to?
The deadline, Teresa, I'll let you kind of backfill on the procedural piece of this.
Lost the deadline, but it's on here, and I would have to let them know whether or not you request a hearing.
The hearing is the more prudent thing to do, correct?
I would make this recommendation with any business that doesn't have a zoning certificate. I feel like that's a necessary piece, and it's nothing against the applicant that's putting together a zoning permit. I just don't want to see the cart get before the horse,
The deadline is 11/24.
or the horse before the cart.
11:25?
Saturday.
Okay, so what would council like to do?
Let me ask you this, so the real steps would be, he's applying for it, but it's a dry area, so we have to say, yes, you can if you can get it approved by the people, is that correct? I mean, if it's dry, then why would he get a permit?
I believe whenever they submitted the application, they were not aware that it was dry, and from my
Okay, so does that make the permit request null and void? I mean, I don't see a reason to do a permit if it's a dry area where it's gotta go to a ballot to get approved. Okay, we shouldn't be acting, I don't feel we should be acting on it because it can't be done. Okay, that's an opinion, but I mean, I'm just listening to what's being said.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Sure, I agree with you procedurally. Is there a benefit or disadvantage for us looking at what we would like to see develop in that particular area? 'Cause I believe it's off of 62, right? And then would taking action on this potentially move the ball down the road if we want to change it from dry to not dry?
All
Or
good
give someone the
questions.
opportunity to do that?
All good questions. I would recommend that if you wanted to explore some of those items, I can give you hypotheses, but I can't give you law. And with something like this, I would recommend that if you wanted to get further information, you specifically get good legal counsel. It's going to give you direction one way or the other. The one thing that I will say, whether this be this application or any other application, there's so many permits that are allowed in a certain area. And this isn't the situation for this application. I just want to preface that ahead of time. You can do kind of an emergency or economic piece that allows for liquor permits, whether it be beer, wine, or high proof, to be established in certain areas. The city went through that exercise with the downtown district and allowing some of these new businesses to pop up. Be very strategic in where you allow that. In the downtown, I think the intent was to probably work through some type of DORA. If you had that same situation in other areas, you could get maybe an element that you don't want, maybe an element that you do want. I think you just really have to look at the districts that you're looking at specifically, and just weigh all the positives and negatives that go into it. There could be a lot of positives that go into it, like with the downtown. There could be a lot of negatives that go into it if it's put in the wrong district. So that's just a kind of a side, separate item. Doesn't really answer the question for this tonight.
Well, a follow-up question. I want to be fair to the applicant. If we have no intention or interest in moving forward with alcohol, liquor in that area, we'd want to signal that now versus go for a hearing and then extend it out. Because maybe that's conditional on whether they want to go through with the business or not. I have no idea what their business model is. I just want to be as fair as we can. If we're not interested in doing that at all, say no. If it's something that we would consider, then I would recommend we have a hearing and do the due diligence through the process.
There is an allowance for a 30-day extension if you, as a council, want to explore something further.
And that would give us 30 days to go to hearing or approve it.
No, it's 30 days before even the hearing, correct?
That's what it would give us another
Yeah, 30
set of 30 days to make a
One-time
decision.
only opportunity for a 30-day extension.
Okay, so if you think that's a direction we may go, we have an option for an extension or hearing. If it's a direction you think we're not going to go at all, I would imagine even the candidate would prefer to know that now versus waiting for 30, 60, 90 days to go by and string this out. I don't know how committed they are. I don't know the project's at. I really don't know anything about the project.
I don't have a tremendous amount of background yet because we're still working through the application.
Can we at least do the 30-day and do the research before we make any decisions? I hate to make a decision now without us having any of the research and any of the knowledge that we need.
I wouldn't want to make a decision on a business without having them here either.
Mhm.
If you're going to make a decision on a business's future, you should probably have them in front of you
Mhm.
to answer questions.
Yeah, were they aware that this was coming
Yeah.
before us today?
Yeah.
Yes. I informed them that there was some justification for them to get that zoning permit in for probably at least a qualifier to you all. And I let them know that, this was going before council. We could have brought it before you all last week, I'm sorry, not last week, but the meeting prior. They didn't have the zoning certificate. I said, if you get all your stuff in, that's a hurdle or a box that could be checked off that would allow you to probably have a more favorable light with the council whenever you go for request for a hearing or not a hearing. The feedback that I got after following back up with them is it's not going to matter at this point because we found out that it's dry. And that's how I got the information from the applicant. So at that point, the urgency to get the zoning certificate across the finish line had really slowed.
Seems like it is conditional for them.
Well, I just want to make sure he follows the right steps so that if, I'm not against him having a liquor license. I just want to make sure that we don't say yes and then the state says, well, you can't because you're a dry area and you got to have it voted on. I don't want to disappoint the gentleman. I want him to say, well, here's the procedure you got to follow. And if we follow that, then the likelihood of passing is really good. You know, that's what I want.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I think a 30-day extension request will give the applicant an opportunity to dig in, get their ducks in a row, and if they have intention to move forward or not, let us know. If we go through that exercise, this comes up again, the applicant's not present, doesn't provide additional information, we know kind of where they stand. But that would be my thought.
I'd like to go with the 30 day. Council in agreement with 30 days?
Do we need to take a vote on
Do we need to
that?
take a vote, Teresa?
You don't need to vote, I mean, unless you want to, but I can notify the department that you are requesting the 30-day extension.
And could you give the applicant notice?
It doesn't stop them from
To-
putting something on the ballot, does it?
That's quite all right too. I mean, again, if the citizens say, we want to do this devoid of information, so be it.
Yeah, I was just saying, there's a timeline coming up for when they have to put that on the ballot, so
Yeah.
I don't think it would stop them, but
And just for information, a D3 is just for high proof spirituous sales. It's not for beer or wine. So currently, they do not have a beer or wine license. This is specifically just for high proof spirituous sales.
is there another business that's in close proximity that something like this has been approved?
I don't know, any of
How do
them.
you mean?
Well, I guess
Define close
Kroger.
proximity.
Is the Flying Iron?
No,
Well, they're not high proof.
Flying Iron.
Is
They're
the Axe
BYOB.
going? Does that have?
That's what I was gonna say, does Flying Iron have
They
anything?
do not have a
They're BYOB.
permitted either.
They're BYOB, yeah.
They
They're
operate under
BYOB.
BYOB, which has its own
Flavor.
Right.
risk and challenges in it as well. And I would always recommend any business that wants to do that, get into the good legal counsel to give you good advice to make sure that you don't do anything out of step with any of the various laws that exist in the state of Ohio.
And I'd like to hear the chief's input on the situation as well.
Okay.
Sean, if it
Once-
goes
once
to
we have
ballot, who
details.
pays for it?
They do.
The
They do?
Yes.
I just want to make sure he knows that too.
Okay, so we're good there? Okay. Next on the minutes is citizen comments on matters not on the agenda. Mr. Monroe, did you get anybody?
I don't have any speaker slips, no.
Does anybody like to speak tonight? Hearing none. Okay, next item is council committee reports. Planning and zoning met November 14th. Their next is next Tuesday at 6:30. Mr. Green, do you have anything?
The item that we talked about, we will talk about later on tonight.
Okay. Design Review Board, they also met the 14th, and the next is next Tuesday at 5:30. Ms. Monroe or Mr. Stainer, do you guys have anything to report from that one?
I do.
The Design Review Board met. The last meeting, they went through 2 applications, one being a sign, changing of the text that it was currently already on the wall. The business had a little bit of a change in structure, so just changing of the text for that particular sign. That recommendation was made by the Design Review Board, bless you, with some conditions. So as long as they meet those conditions, that application will move forward. The other application was for a new business that's still working through the zoning permit process as well. It's an art studio, to summarize it. Create Joy, I believe, is the technical name for it. And anytime a sign, whether it be a monument sign or a wall sign, is introduced, it has to go before the Design Review Board. So they were having a wall sign application, and so it had to go before the Design Review Board. As it currently stands, it's above the 8-foot clearance, so it would not need to go back for a variance. The variance would then go to the zoning board, so they approved that, if memory serves me correctly, Teresa. Create Joy, the sign above, okay. And then the
And
other
for the
one was,
paint on the door.
yeah, and then the other one was the dental, the shopping center, and then the third one, I lied, there was three. Unless I remember another, and there'll be a fourth. A house is getting re-sided.
Yeah.
Typically, and this is where we're trying to work through this, and I've communicated this to you all before. In our code, and I'm trying to follow the code, whether right, wrong, or different, I'm just trying to follow the code. These are my rules, and these are the parameters in which I stay in. If it's just a replacement of siding, it's the same material, it's fine. But whenever we have a different material or a change in the architecture of it, I put it before the design review board, and they make a recommendation. So this one was taking horizontal siding, and they were going to a board on batten type of siding. So that is a change that in our code defined as a major change because it's a material change. So with that, it went before the design review board. They had some pretty good discussion, got some better refinement of what exactly was taking place. I think they made a couple recommendations. Applicant said that was fine, and so that got approved as well. So that'll be a house that's being remodeled on William Street. Design review board seemed to be okay with it. I also specifically look at the ones that are inside specific districts, whether it be the corridor district, the downtown district. So if it falls in there and it's on the bubble, I'll probably push towards it being inside of the design review board's wheelhouse. And just in case I do get any questions, there's a building downtown that had been painted. There's sometimes some questions of, hey, does it have to go before the design review board? The building had previously been painted, so the material is not changing, still paint on paint. As long as it's not any colors that are too extraordinary per your code, it doesn't qualify as a major change, so it stays in-house with the city manager. Now, if you want to change your code, you do that, but currently I can't make someone do something outside of the codified ordinances, so going to a very neutral color, a gray, in your code, that's not something that would trigger it. Now, if it was taking it from a brick to a paint, that's changing material. That would be a different situation, but since it was already painted, putting a new paint on it. And I walked through this whole thing with zoning, so apologize to Ryan, he's had to hear this twice now. Design
Sorry.
review board, same thing. And I do this just to qualify it, but also to allow you to know what your code is referencing and nodding to me to do. So if you want to change your code, and we've talked about it, there's a variety of other things we're trying to get through, but I just bring it back to the surface so you're aware.
Is there a listing of colors of paint they can't use? Like, what is the
I wish you
objective
did
standard
have that.
for?
No, it's subjective. I think we're gonna have to take a hard look when we get to the historic overlay. That's where it's gonna be most impactful, right? And then try to put some guardrails around it.
Yeah.
But I think that's all part of the MKSK process that we're marching through.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Safety and Service, their next meeting is December 5th at 5 p.m. Finance met tonight. Our next meeting is December 5th for a special meeting at 5:30 in the administrative conference room. We discussed the budget tonight, and we discussed the failed tax proposal. The current Finance Committee is begging and urging the new council members to come to the next Finance Committee meeting. There's some decision stuff that need to be made that we want multiple inputs on it, so please come. Park and Rec, they met November 6th. Their next is 12/4 at 1 p.m. in the conference room. Events Committee, they met 11:15 at 5:30. Is there anything from that one?
We discussed the amphitheater and water park. Some of us would like to go forward with the grant, but we have until June 2024 if we pursue that. So that was pretty much it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Ms. Hendon, if you could provide projections of costs as soon as possible so we can look at it as part of the budget. 'Cause I don't believe there's a line item for that. There's a set aside for general things, but we'll probably double that line to move one or both of those projects forward, and we just need to have that in the mix when we start looking at where things will get laid in.
Tree Commission, their next meeting is November 30th. That's their final of the year, correct, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It's at 5 p.m. in council chambers. Director reports, Chief of Police. Chief Smart, if you'd like to go over your report? Or do you just want us, I didn't know if you wanted to go over it or if you wanted us to summarize it, so. Okay, I knew the street, the water, and the sewer, but I wanted to make sure on the police. I didn't want to shortchange it.
Surprise.
Does any council members have any questions on Chief Smart report? Okay. No questions from anybody? Okay. Next is application 1010-2, temporary use 480 West Coshocton Street. This is the laydown site right there by Raccoon Estates, I think it is.
Yep. Across from Wits.
Yes. Mr. Stainer, if you'd like to go over this, this is our new process we just put in place.
Yes, you may recall that council put in just recently a temporary use permit, which may have been specifically for one intended user, but it also can be useful and impactful for other areas throughout the town that are temporary in nature as well. So a good effort that you went through. This is our first application that's kind of coming out of the gate. This one may be a little bit different, so I want to put some brackets around this. I've talked to Trevor with MKSK, realizing that this one was somewhat existing in nature. All of the spelled out specific requirements in the application, we would ideally, in a perfect world, like to see those a little bit more detailed. However, kind of know what we're getting because it's already there. So, and the efficiencies of redundancy and not making everyone go through an exercise that may not prove to be beneficial for everyone's time or cost. Utilizing this to, say, hey, this is where we're at. Let's get this one at least evaluated, see if this is something that's agreeable to you all, knowing that the next time it will, before it gets started, have to go through all the proper requirements that are in place. So to summarize, applicants applying for a temporary use permit for a laydown/construction site, roughly 3.5 acres. Zoning does not allow for that particular use in the GCC2 district, so they were notified whenever they started to operate that that is not a consistent use with that area, and that they would be under violation, and we would be issuing a zoning violation to them. Immediately reached out, said, how can we work through this? Called up MKSK, we strategized. They said temporary use is something that they've used in other municipalities to sometimes accommodate it if they see it's appropriate. So reached back out to the violating party, and I said, hey, we're willing to work through this. No guarantees, but that's kind of where we're at. If you don't agree to it, then I'll have the zoning inspector issue a violation. If you seem like you want to work through this process, this may be an avenue for you to work through. So we got that through to council. At this point, it came through the zoning board as part of the procedure that you adopted. They can make a recommendation, they can not make a recommendation, but after it goes to them, 10 days later, minimum, has to go to you all, and that's why it's coming before you. They did approve it with some conditions. The conditions are on the last page of your packet. I can read through those, or I can probably summarize a lot of it.
You could.
And then you can go into the details a little bit more if you want. One of the things that came out of it was screening, and this was also recommendations that came from MKSK and staff. Screening, as far as a fence, 6-foot fence along 62, to provide some type of screening with a probably chain link fence, but then a black mesh that would be across it, consistent with what you probably have seen in other construction sites throughout central Ohio. So that would be a requirement. The exact length and delineation and bracketing is spelled out. Performance bond was another one that MKSK came up with. It's a performance bond or letter of credit. What this does is it speaks to the other items that are in 3 and 5, and that is to make sure that the site, after it's done being utilized for what it's being utilized for, can then be taken back. And if the applicant would just leave the site, then we would be stuck with it. We could pull the performance bond or letter of credit, and then we would be able to go in and hire our contractors. And the intent there is to make sure that whatever is done, if it's a parking lot, it's probably a different situation. With this one, they've introduced gravel to the area, silt fences, and all the other various things that are happening there. We would be able to come in with a grader, grade that out, do some grass seed. This one is a little bit different. Had a conversation with the applicant. He said, are you going to require me to take it all back to grass for the entire site? He goes, because I think it's pretty known that there was a little bit of an operation that existed there before. I said, I don't think it's legally allowed for us to require you to take it back better than what it was before, but at least to the same condition that it was prior to your. He said, that's fine, we just want to make sure that we're not getting ourselves into where we've got to take away the entrance, take away all the fence that was already there. He said, get it back to where it was prior to your moving in, and that's probably the best we can do. And he said, I think we'll do that, and then we'll probably actually go a little above and beyond, just to make it easier on us so that we're not doing a circle around one specific area and leaving that alone and then going to another site. So that's the reasoning for the performance bond. That speaks to the fact that they do have to go back and restore the site to its previous condition. Also, the time period on this will be a 5-month permit, expires. Talking to the applicant, I believe they should be wrapped up around hopefully February or March with that particular site. And then they would be able to come in after the fact, seed, grass would start to grow. So that would allow for that site to be restored. Another item that you all had was a letter from the parcel owner noting the allowability of the use referenced in 1132. So just making sure that the property owner is aware that this is happening and that they're okay with it. So, and I think that's more for later applications. That's something that they want to see as a qualifier, making sure that any other
Yeah,
application.
we were just
comes
kind of
through.
setting precedent with that.
So with that, I'll entertain any questions. I know one of the questions that's going to get asked, so I'll already answer it. What's the permit fee? It's $1,500 per half acre. So you can do the math. It's roughly 3.5 acres. We always round up, but it's per the half acre. So 3.5 times 1.5, you're looking at right around $10,000 permit. Applicant knows that. You're agreeable to that?
If-
Conversations that I've heard.
If council decided they didn't want to approve this, they would have to leave, and they're not bound to fix it back up to the way they found it.
No, we wouldn't have any,
We wouldn't have any recourse.
well,
to make
maybe,
that.
because if they're in violation of code to lay it down, everything that happens in it past that initial violation, they said something down there in violation.
Whatever the EPA and ORC requires. them to
Well, and
do, so
any
they
changes
can
they
do it.
made to that during the violation period, they have to they have to fix.
Is that on us, or is that on the?
It would probably be on the property
It-
owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be on the, well, it would
It's
be,
always
it would
on
be
the
on the
property
leasing,
owner.
the leasing party, but yeah.
But the
No, it's on
benefit,
the property owner.
Well, I'm sorry, the lessor.
It's always on the property owner,
The-
regardless if they default or not.
Am I using the right term? Lessor leases it, lessee takes it, so it would be on the lessor.
so the benefit would be for the city to have a repercussion, something to go back after them, to make sure it's done right and done nice.
There's probably more positives that exist with doing a temporary use than not. I feel one of the positives would be the financial gain that you're all getting, and I
Yeah.
walked through that process with them. They said, well, seems a little exorbitant. I said, well, tell that to the residents that have had to live there. And they live in, a nice subdivision and mud getting tracked out onto the street. And rightfully so, they've done a pretty tremendous job of keeping that site in pretty good order, as much as they can for a laydown site. Anytime there's a complaint or a situation, they pretty actively go out there and try to address it. But I said, look, this is having an impact to the city from the residents that are surrounding it and the traffic that it's creating, and there should be some type of financial implication that they at least feel like they're getting a win in their column, or at least a break even. There was a process that we had to create and spent time and money on through planning and zoning and legal to make sure that this was a viable avenue, because the only other option was leave or pay the penalty. And leave was not a great option for them. It's not always necessarily that we can't make them do what we want them to do. If it's not a good option for them, sometimes it's not, and they have to leave. The other option would be that violation piece, and usually there's legal fees that are associated with that. And it just gets a little more complicated, so.
Does council have any questions on this?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
More of a comment than a question. I'd like to see procedurally that there be existing condition or starting conditioning photographic documentation that's responsibility of the applying party, so that we don't have any ambiguity on what it was and what it is. And then that can be subject to approval for completion by zoning inspector, who works for the city manager, who works at the will of the council. So there's a chain of responsibility that goes through that. That would just kind of clean it up. Well, this is what it looked like when we got here. No, it didn't. Yes, it did.
In the application process, and this is where I said it gets a little awkward because it's already there. In a normal application process, they would have to file current status, take pictures, submit those, so that we knew the current status, and then what it's going to be going to, and then what it would be restored
So
to.
that's in there as it is.
Yes.
That's good.
There are some provisions baked in there that, yes.
And the
part of
second comment that I would
application
have would be,
is Current use.
I think it's a good compromise, but I don't want to signal to other people potentially in the situation that asking for forgiveness is acceptable versus asking for permission. This is a unique situation. This is the initial one. In the future, laydown will be instant violation.
Oh, 100%.
And then it would come with whatever comes with that, and that could impact their ability to get the temporary use permit.
And some other property owners that may be in the area have been notified that this is not the new norm going forward.
Absolutely not.
And as soon as something starts to be active on that site that's not consistent with the GCC 1 or GCC 2 or whatever the code allows in that particular area, if it's in violation of it, there will be a violation letter sent until you get it in order. So,
We're happy with the 20,000.
So on zoning, we put out 20, but we knew that council may have some discussion on that.
it's a number from an estimate standpoint. In a perfect world, and this was from Trevor, we would like to have
Double.
an analysis done
And double.
ahead of time. I think it was agreeable that if they walked away from it, they're obviously going to remove the equipment, that I could either A, have Jack's guys, which would be a big undertaking, or hire out a company, I'd say for 20 grand to get it back to good. It's not a bad number to have in your pocket. I think you could get somebody down there pretty quickly. If you're just talking, taking it back to grass, you're not talking about. There was
ODOT
already
was there
existing.
before. Yeah, ODOT was there before it tore it up,
The retention
unfortunately.
ponds and stuff like that, it
Yeah.
already existed. Now, if you're bringing in dirt to fill those in, that's a different situation, but to literally pack up the gravel, haul it away, and then to throw down some grass seed,
Yeah.
I feel pretty confident the city's gonna be okay with 20 grand. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I know in the application procedure moving forward, we'll have to have
There needs to be an analysis.
professional inspection done that would give us an exact number.
This is, while we're on the topic before we lose it, I don't remember if we do or we don't, and if we don't, we should look at it. We're coming into winter, so you'll have all the Pultees will get conditional occupancies because they won't fulfill their grass requirement and concrete or asphalt. Do we have a bond? Do we make them bond right now? Because if we don't, we should talk about it later. So you could write it down and think about it.
Thought we
but-
do, don't we,
We
Jack?
do have a bond that we reduced. Because
No, not for
The
them as a,
bond that we
not
had
for them
was
as a
for the-
total per lot. So like a
That
lot
was for
of
their punch list. Was the
yeah,
bond that
not
we
for
had
their
them
punch
put up.
list. So like
Yeah.
you know the next 20 houses that don't get asphalt because they shut the plants down in 3 days. They have to do that to finish their occupancy. But are we requiring them to bond? Lots of communities require them to bond so that you know they're gonna not that they're not gonna come back and do it. But
Jack was-
if we get stuck having to do
Jack
it,
said no.
so we can talk about it later in other business. But we
I
should.
think I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, John, and the answer to that is no.
I would say
We haven't
we,
required it.
Because we can come back
Driveway.
at the end, couldn't we, at the punch list?
Not for their whole community. I'm talking about like you just build a house.
Right, but
Yeah.
but we're not going to pass them off on the whole community if
It's
they don't do
not-
these driveways.
It'll be the driveways are private.
I would
Doesn't matter,
recommend
Jack.
not issuing I would recommend not doing a conditional occupancy.
But yeah, but we don't
permit.
have the zoning, or we don't hold the building. That's why I think it's an issue.
No, but we can withhold the occupancy permit.
Right.
Until
But
the
usually-
driveway is complete.
Yep.
The grass, I think there's a little bit of a work there, But with the driveway, I would highly recommend that we don't issue an occupancy permit if it's gravel.
Right.
Well,
I
assuming
would
we're
say it
gonna-
needs to be complete before we would issue an
Yeah, that's a
occupancy.
discussion
Yeah, it
between
will-
the home buyer and the home
Well, to
builder.
close their loan, they have to
That's
get
it.
conditional occupancy. That's what I'm saying.
Inspect is.
Yeah, the loan, yeah, they won't let the loan close.
Whatever happened to Green
Okay.
Acres there?
So they-
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Mirage
that's what
And then the
forces them.
fear
to
is that they never, they
Well,
almost
if a-
always
if
do,
a
but they
builder
could
goes
not
bankrupt-
come back and then it's stuck on the homeowner.
Yeah, but
Yeah, there's
Holdy's not gonna go bankrupt.
No, no,
Right.
Holy's not, but
It was nasty
Okay.
for a while.
rules are for the worst players, right?
So let's go back to this
They
one.
didn't even grade it. They didn't grade
So
it.
is there any other council questions on this temporary use permit?
No.
No,
They did a great job
like I said, we were up for discussion on the 20, but based on
for months.
the information that we got, that's what we went with.
Okay.
For months.
Charlie or Ms. Shook, you guys have any questions on the temporary use?
There's some,
Nothing?
There were people living there.
Okay.
gonna be some public questions.
We'll have that.
Any public questions? Mr. Vaught?
I got a question on the other side of the street where the big dirt pile is. What's going on with that?
That's a great question.
Can we hold that for other business?
Can we do it in other business? We'll come back to it. Any other, Mr. Barr, if you can come up here?
I had a question. I have a question.
The question is to restore the area with the 20,000 will be the entire area with grass?
It will be to take the site back to what it was before. And what it was before was
You answered my
a
question.
variety of things, yeah.
So I would recommend that you take a look at your budget to take it all back to grass with some kind of ride, hold tight turf fescue, overseed it. Because it is a watershed going into the creek that whoever comes in next again to use it, then the whole area is restored. And they have to return it and use it as a lay down area again to protect our waterways. So just a thought there.
So what are our rights with mandating what the owner of that land does in the future?
Or what access we have to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You would have to go to your site requirements that would be in GCC two. And as long as they met, not exceeded, as long as they met the site requirements of GCC two, you would be challenged from any other enforcement beyond that. So without kind of digging into that, I wouldn't be able to give you a good answer.
You have a lot more leverage going forward than what we did.
I don't know if we could force him to make it all grass.
Yeah.
And I don't, without his permission, you couldn't do it either.
Okay. Any other citizen comments? Okay, Ms. Shook, you had a question?
Yes, the screening that you guys have around the perimeter, is that the entire perimeter that you are screening that? Because it seems to here it's not.
So-
There's a picture here.
I did,
That I looked at to reference
It's the
that.
front and then it kicks back.
Yeah, so we did the whole frontage and it brackets back. Now the trouble, we had the same argument on doing the whole property. So they have a silt fence that goes around. The other bad part about this property is everybody who's gonna see that property and have trouble with it, you're up above it.
I see,
So
I
like a
understand
6-foot
that.
fence doesn't, we had the same conversation with completely surrounding it.
Yeah.
There's natural screening on the back of trees and things like that, because I had the same question, Sean can tell you. The residents behind there are screened with trees, and things like that, so.
They also have a fence too, don't they?
They
That
also-
wooden fence.
Yeah, but
Well,
the ones on top of the hill,
part
you
of
can't
it,
fence
there's-
high
Well,
enough.
my
Yeah.
question here is that underneath the actual, actual, what do you want to call it, resolution, whatever you want to call it, it requires the site to be completely, yeah, so what are we
That was
allowing?
my question.
Are we allowing a variance here then for that particular TUP? Because if that's it, then it needs to be noted in there,
Yeah.
that this is a variance, because technically, according to this particular document that we made, that we voted on, it has to be completely surrounded by fencing
Yeah.
or some kind of
That's the same
boundary.
question I
So we're going to have to make a variance here. They're going to apply for a variance.
I don't know that we do.
So with the temporary use application, it's a little bit different than regular zoning. So zoning doesn't actually rule on this. This one goes directly to council. So I would defer to Thad if he was here, our legal counsel, but I think because the final say comes to council, you have some discretion to navigate. It's your ordinance, you set it forth. You want to make sure it meets the requirements, it's in your discretion. Variances are given through a board,
Okay.
through a P and Z board, and there's a process set forth in that. variance application that the board would then have to go
Yep.
through. It's kind of a quasi judicial board and a judicial process. Like I said, because it goes directly to council for you all, it can be a little bit different. You created the ordinance, you can amend kind of the,
This specific one's kind of like a variance anyway, because we're dealing with this all after the fact. So that's what, there was some give and take in this with,
I just don't want to come back to bite.
Yeah, the only question I have is,
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
but because it is a council discretion thing, it's not really necessarily a traditional variance. We're not exposed to someone saying, well, you didn't make them
Yes,
do
that's,
that.
that's,
Because
what we discussed
it's
that too, yeah.
it's custom per application.
I think you can point to the expectation is, on a case-by-case situation, you'll review it and evaluate it to see if it's not. If you want to wait till we get a recommendation from FAD, we can.
Well, with the temporary use permit as written and as enacted, we can just say no because we don't want to.
Correct. Yeah, you can do anything you want.
could.
I mean,
Right,
you
so
can say, "No, we don't want to."
therefore, we're not gonna be to the same legal standard and legal challenges of saying, you need to treat everyone equally, because we are treating everyone equally. We can say no to anyone we'd like. Of course, you can sue over anything, but
It's kind of like a PD district, gives you a lot of latitude to go one way, left or right.
that's
with
a good
the,
point,
with
but
the
I think
fence
we're
though,
okay.
Oh, you think
with
we're
the
okay?
fence, we did discuss it. The silt fence is around it, so at least runoff, things like that are captured.
up.
There is trees around the site. There haven't been any complaints. Were there complaints from the residents?
There were a lot of
Yeah.
questions from
Yeah.
residents, concerns. I don't know that anyone specifically issued a complaint, like, I want to make a complaint. They were like, what the heck's going on here? What's this going to look like? Is
Right.
it going to make a bunch of noise at night? We covered the noise, we covered the lighting. So, all valid questions. So,
As far as their view, we determined it's not gonna, the fence is not gonna help the view because everybody that sees it is above it.
I agree with that. I'm just simply stating I don't want us to open ourselves up for
Prudent.
somebody coming back and saying, well, you didn't make them do it,
Yeah,
and being covered some way in that, so.
I get it.
Any other questions? Okay. What's the will of council on this one?
You just call a straw poll if you want. Done.
We don't need to vote on this, Teresa? We can just do a straw poll?
Oh, yeah, it's
yeah, it's a
We have to
vote.
vote on this.
Okay,
Alright.
then we need to vote.
need
So
to
we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as written.
No, second.
I just want to clarify just a quick question. So the list of planning and zoning recommendations, are you approving with?
As written, I think is what he said, right?
Yeah. Is there
Would be
any
included.
conditions that anyone wants to add?
If this makes you feel better, I'm just tossing this out there, you could say in light of the fact that there is screening due to natural vegetation, it supplements the need for a fence back there, and that way if anyone else came before the board without any natural vegetation, there would be a requirement. And I would assume if there was natural vegetation, then you would have the same consideration given for this particular applicant if you wanted to make that comment on the record.
Do you want to add that, Ryan?
I would like to add
No,
that
we
on.
have-
I would like to add
I
that
think
on.
if they came, honestly, for me, where I was on zoning, if anyone would have came to us with a beginning site, you'd be doing fence around the whole thing, because this was the same question that I had.
I'm
But
good.
in this case, with where we were and
Then it needs to be stated in there then that the reason we did not make them put
because of
fencing
the
around it is
vegetation.
because of natural vegetation and boundaries that were
The topography.
by nature, something along those lines, just so that's
Yep.
noted in here, so we can go back and say, well, the reason we did not allow that one to go is because of that particular instance, so,
Yeah, well, we have a motion on the floor, so procedurally, you have to withdraw it.
Yes.
yeah.
Come back again.
You want to
if you
withdraw?
guys
Or
want
let
that,
it die on the
I'll
vine.
withdraw the motion.
Yeah, you can withdraw the motion, or we can let it die out through vote, whatever you
I'll
want.
withdraw. We'll be quick.
Yep.
You good with that, Teresa?
I'm really confused.
We're gonna withdraw the motion.
We're gonna amend the
procedurally
language.
Mopping this up
Yes.
for you.
We're withdrawing the motion to approve, and Ryan's gonna make a new motion.
Got it.
So
Got it.
I'm going to make the motion, and we have to add this as a condition or just a note on the file
About the surrounding fencing.
about the surrounding fencing being forgiven because the
Add that in the conditions at the reason
because of the
for.
conditions and topography of the current site.
And then also referencing the conditions for zoning.
And that,
PNC conditions. Got it. A
Okay.
second?
I second.
Go.
All right. Charlie Campbell,
yes.
Nicole Shook,
Yes,
Bob Orsini,
Yes.
John Merriman,
Yes.
Mayor Barnard,
Yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
Karen Hendry.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, there's no tabled legislation. We do have one item, public hearing of legislation, that came to us late today. So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we can walk through it. Was talked about in finance. It's Resolution 2023-35, a resolution to approve the job position and salary range for Public Works Foreman. Whereas the city manager desires to create a job description and salary range for a Public Works Foreman with the city of Johnstown. And I'll let Sean go ahead and break this down a little bit more.
Sure, I'll give you some background. So we had Daniel Swick, who was the street superintendent, take another job in another municipality. So looking at our current staffing situation, and obviously the structure moving forward, starting to ebb and flow a little bit, had a conversation with Jack. We kind of had a team meeting, powwow together. The thought process coming up with a foreman position rather than a street superintendent position had some advantages in the current moment that we're in. And maybe it's something that we can utilize as we start to grow, and we can utilize the foreman position with other departments as well. So with the foreman position, some of the differences, it's not salary, so it's an hourly position to where Daniel was a salary position. So it's one step below that superintendent. This also creates a little bit of a cost savings for the city because of the hourly. It's not going to be that salary position that's escalated a little bit. Some of those executive tasks, administrative tasks that maybe were the expectation of the superintendent before can be pulled back a little bit. That's obviously not going to be the foreman's major focus. He's going to be kind of taking the crew out, getting direction from the service director. Service director will meet with him, give him the instructions, and more hands-on, more guiding. We have an individual within the city that may be a viable candidate for that position. As I mentioned, it's hourly. The hourly piece could also incentivize if there was a snow situation and that particular individual had to be called out, he's still going to get compensated. So it's a heck of a lot easier to force yourself out of bed, albeit you got to, but if your salary, you're not getting paid anymore and you got to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning versus, hey, I'm gonna reap a little bit of benefit by coming in on Christmas Day to plow snow and missing things with my family, and I'm gonna get a little bit of overtime for that. That makes the conversation a little bit easier. So it's a win, I think, for the city from a reduced salary standpoint, as well as a win for obviously the employee that may be forced into that situation. So that's a little bit of the background on it. We're also reworking the name a little bit. Street superintendent, I didn't want to do street foreman. Street really speaks to this one specific task. If you've noticed our guys that are out and about, typically during the summer, you'll see them doing park stuff, you'll see them doing building maintenance. Sometimes they're running a backhoe to dig a hole so the street guys can get in there, or I'm sorry, so the water and sewer guys can get in there to do a repair. So the word we have now on the position is public works foreman. So that really speaks to a lot of different of the variety of things in which they do rather than just specifically streets. So if we were to advertise for this position, it probably better reflects what this position is actually going to be rather than street superintendent or street laborer, because they show up and they're like, I thought I was just doing streets and you got me down at the parks, or I'm watering, plants downtown, or I'm changing trash downtown, or I'm up at the city offices changing out light bulbs today. So wanted to speak a little bit more specifically to the broad range of what they do. So that's the background. Open to any questions. Jack, feel free to jump in.
And this was something that Jack and Sean came up with to replace us.
I'm curious, did Pataskal offer him a lot more money, or?
I don't know that it was more money, but it was an hourly situation, which was...
It was flexibility, I think,
Yeah.
with the hours.
So, and I don't want to, I'll say this, I don't want to speak too much and go too far into that. I think it's a valid question. But if we go too far into that, I want to be respectful of that employee. This is some of the reasons as to why he left. It was nothing nefarious. It was just a better situation for him. He felt that was the best move with his current situation. Everybody left on good terms is where I will leave that at. And if you want to have an executive session to go through any of the exiting things that happened, you're more than welcome to, but I will leave it at everything was pretty agreeable. Nothing conflicting or any bad situations. Sometimes that happens.
Will he or she have to have any qualifications or licensings for that Chuck?
Great question. So,
We have a list
go ahead.
in the thing, CDL, obviously,
yeah.
Class B CDL. Needs to have some experience, obviously, in running heavy equipment and items like that. I think valid Ohio driver's license along with that CDL.
So no license, like,
No water sewer.
no water sewer,
licenses, no.
that, sorry, thank you, that's what I was getting, okay.
And
We're gonna want that individual to get confined space training, things
Well,
like that.
do we pay for that, does the city pay for
Yeah,
that?
oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we would cover that in our training budget.
okay.
And that's another piece that we didn't get quite across the finish line. Teresa had it teed up to have an exhibit. Per our charter, you have to institute the position and institute the pay. Job description, though, can fall a little bit on me. As soon as I get that job description completed, something that Jack and I were working on, we've ripped off and duplicated. Got a couple municipalities. I like a little bit of variety from each one, so formulated that, kicked it over to Jack, said, hey, put your eyes on this, see what you see are some deficiencies that maybe are out of whack. He was able to identify some ones really specifically and said, hey, we don't require this. This isn't consistent with what we do here. So we drafted together a job description. So I have a draft of the job description, and it has those qualifications baked into it. As soon as we get that done, I can forward that out to council, and that will be given to HR so that they can have that. And then we probably have a further discussion with whether we decide that current in-house promoting up is going to be the option, or whether we want to put this out for a job search. But at least we'll have a job description that we can post online for a job search. The pay, I want to point out, is starting at, I believe it's in your packet, 22 to 29. How we came up with this number is our pay scale currently for a regular street worker is $4 less. So the idea is if you're a foreman, you bump it up $4 in your range. Doesn't mean this person's going to start at 29. Just means that that's a range. So currently our street guys, if they have not as much responsibility, just told to show up, they're in that $20, $21 range, somewhere at 19. So this obviously a little bit more responsibility sets the pay a little bit higher to accommodate for that responsibility.
This also gives the city more flexibility in our departments as we look in the future at how we want to arrange all our employees, what employees we want in certain areas, and not ties us down to a superintendent there. We can massage it in the future how we need it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from council? Any questions from citizens? Hearing none, do we have any action that wants to be taken by council tonight on this? I'll go ahead and make a motion that we,
Numbers.
do what?
I'll make the motion as well. I just need the numbers.
It's resolution 2023-35.
35. I'll make a motion that we pass resolution 23-35 as written.
I'll second.
Nicole Shook,
Yes.
Bob Orsini,
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Mayor Barnard,
Yes.
Ryan Green,
Yes.
Sharon Hendren.
Yes.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
Okay. That ends all legislation. There's no introduction of legislation tonight. We'll go ahead and move to other business. There's a couple things I wanted to bring up tonight. And I wanted to get council's ideas, the city's ideas on this. I've had a couple complaints on Jersey Street. I believe it's Oregon, from the kids walking home from school from intermediate and the middle school, crossing Jersey, jumping traffic. Is there anything the city can do, like crosswalks like we have over here on 62, to help with that situation over there to make it a little bit safer? And what's council's thoughts on that?
Do you want council's thoughts first?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Chief. What do you think?
My recommendation would be to put a pedestrian crosswalk for the students that are crossing for when they go to and from one side of Jersey Street, along with some, like a crosswalk essentially for that area as well. If there is a stoplight, the stoplight would be for the drivers, pedestrian crosswalk would be for the people walking across the street. That would be my recommendation. To the council, what they want to do with anything.
Bob, did you have anything?
Well, this children crossing the street's been near and dear to my heart for a while. I think it's the first time I came and saw y'all. I understand there's an expense associated with it, and I also understand that funding is in limited supply. So just like everything else, it's everything we do is going to be a difficult decision. My concerns are a lot of times with young drivers or experienced drivers that when you're making a right turn, you look to the left. And when there's no cars coming from the left, you turn to the right. Kids do not always make eye contact with the driver before they cross the street, something I bang into my children's head. And also, both lanes of traffic don't always stop when a kid's crossing the street. My kids have told me specifically they've been hung out in 37 when one side stops and the other side keeps going. So maybe a slight conflict of interest because my children walk to school and cross the highway. But I am fundamentally proactive in nature. To be reactive, especially in these types of situations, the reaction is serious injury, person-car collision, strike, devastating. So I lean heavy to be very proactive whenever possible. Who funds it and to what degree is up for debate to me.
What is the cost for something like that, Jim?
I think the last one we put in is between $10,000 and $14,000. They were solar. But I think the one that put in on Edwards Road was right in that area.
Is
Now,
that
that was put in also quite some time ago.
before COVID?
Yeah.
Is there a way we can do like the safe street or safe,
Routes to school.
yeah? Maybe look at a grant for
Really
that?
deals with more of sidewalks.
Sidewalk.
Is it more sidewalks?
It does identify crossings, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Because I don't wanna see you all step into something and then 3 months later, you realize, oh my goodness. You can do whatever you want. If you wanna go with the chief's recommendation, that's completely fine, but I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate. I believe in that intersection, it has a traffic light, which is typically supposed to be more safe than a flashing crosswalk. Now, I would defer to the engineers on this. What I'm saying is, if you get a complaint at Oregon Street in Jersey that you need a crosswalk there, what's gonna be the qualifier for whenever they say, well, I want a crosswalk at Williams in Jersey, and then I also want a crosswalk down at Saratoga in Jersey? And where I'm trying to get you to keep away from the slippery slope is you need to have a really good qualifier. And I would suggest really doing a traffic study or getting an engineer involved with the safety of a crosswalk versus a traffic light. Is it going to impact it? Is it not going to impact it? What does historical data suggest? Where is it going to be most impactful? Because I could see where all of a sudden you've accommodated to this situation. Well, my kids on the other side of town are no less important, and I need
I
you
agree
to
100%.
put in a crosswalk at Edwards and Oregon Street. And if you don't, and you did down there, well, my tax dollars are just as good as theirs. So that's why I say I'm trying to protect you from the conversations that will exist. And I'm not saying you don't do it. What I'm saying is if you are going to consider this, that you work through a data formulated system that gives you good background information when it comes to where a crosswalk is effective. If a traffic light is there, is it as effective? Is it not as effective? Because I can see this being a slippery slope to where one hand goes up and then 15 others go up, and then you don't have the financial resources. And I don't think that's the game you want to play, and I don't think that's the messaging that you want to send out to the
So
public.
my question,
How many crosswalks do we have on 37 currently?
Where?
There's
2
out
and a
here.
3.
There's 2 or 3.
I couldn't hear your question.
How many crosswalks do we currently have on 37?
4?
4. Is it 4? Okay.
4.
So, and we,
Edwards, two
Right.
downtown, and.
We have-
There's not currently
That Concord area.
we've none on Jersey.
marked crosswalks.
And
What
what do we
is-
have on 62 over there?
You think it would help
Well,
if we
the
just
other thing,
painted some in
and where
there?
you're going is fine, but also where we have the 2 flashing lights, we had room and area to put it in. I'm picturing Oregon and Jersey, these are gonna have to sit back in people's yards. If we're gonna set them back in people's yards, they may be fine. They may go, okay, yeah, put one there. But what if we have someone who says, no, I don't want that in my yard?
Well, and I'll go a step further. Those lights would not be warranted unless there was kid traffic there. So if you want a crosswalk in, then we take out, then do we take out the traffic?
Well,
light?
here's my question on that. So we're talking about the crosswalks on 37 at the blinking lights. Is it still called a crosswalk at 37 and 62, the signs that say walk and don't walk?
It depends on your degree.
Is that
of-
allowable at those intersections, just so that we have, you can walk now? I mean, I know it seems kind of simple, but,
So those pedestrian crosswalks that are right there, of course, those require power. So we'd have to get power to them. And again, where are they gonna set? I mean, there's a lot of questions if you're gonna add something other than the light that's there.
I'm just talking about the little thing that shows the hand walk and don't walk.
Yeah, they're
That's-
We have
$5,000
power
to
there from their
$8,000
side.
a piece.
So the power from the traffic lights wouldn't power that?
We would have to tap into power
Okay.
somewhere
Okay,
and on both sides of the road. See, these other flashing lights, they're solar.
okay.
So that, so we use solar for those. So I don't know if we can find one of those that are solar activated. Maybe
Okay.
we could.
Okay, we had a citizen comment
Is this problem primarily during school, after school?
after school.
Yep.
I think that relying on a crosswalk, I mean, we're all from Jersey. I still want to play cards like you know, you're gonna cross Green Mountain. Relying on a crosswalk and a flashing light for children, I still think it's unsafe. We're really worried about it. Is there a crossing guard situation that we could get together with the school?
Oh, I can expand on that. So I went to the school board, raised my same concerns at 37 because the lights were, they didn't, I think they blinked constant, or which became not, it disappeared to drivers, and now that's been corrected, which made a big difference. When I approached the school about funding that, they said that they don't have jurisdiction on state highways. Now, the streets we're talking about are not state highways. So the school wants the police force to manage it. And when you have two officers on duty, sometimes one, I mean, it's not a viable solution. So we're a little bit in a a lot of hands going down, to which I think I professionally stated that if that's the position, then if something happens, you know that the accountability's got to fall somewhere. I think there's a solution out there for this. Sean's points are very valid. Is there an opportunity to paint if the kids cross there, right?
They are painted.
They're painted. They're painted on the side streets?
On the side ones as well?
On Jersey?
On Jersey? Are they?
At Oregon and Crossing, yes, I believe they're both.
I don't know
Okay.
Oregon, but I don't know Jersey. See, shame on me. I drive those
Yeah.
same streets.
No,
And I don't even-
If
I
they're
didn't even
there,
notice.
I don't
I'm
recognize
trying
them.
to pull up the internet for whatever reason.
Actually, I'm trying to pull up Google Earth right now and I can't.
Also, with that, we've had complaints of kids, not at the light, over on Williams in Jersey, shooting across the
Shooting
road.
across the
Yeah.
street.
So,
Yep.
back to a little bit of what Sean's saying,
Yeah, I don't know if my computer.
how many do we put in? And where? Where do we put them in wherever they're at?
Yeah, I don't want to spend money on the illusion of safety. You know, I want to make sure whatever we do is effective.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring it up because it was a question that,
Marvin's gonna say.
But I can check that for whoever asked that, but I am 99% sure that at the light, there's crosswalks, painted crosswalks on both sides.
Mr. Block,
Can't even find it.
Again, I'm leaving that 10% for error.
No,
I
sure.
will look at that tomorrow, but I'm pretty sure they're all
I
painted.
think it's computer.
I know what they're saying about not controlling sidewalks
Yeah.
on straight highway. In Alexandria, right across 37 at the library, they have guards there. Because they still use it even though there's not a school there, they gather up for the school buses. And there's a guard there and they give the kids a flag and they walk across back and forth. That's a state highway, no light.
I'm only relaying what I was told.
I know, and we'd ask them if they would consider getting volunteers before they go into that either.
maybe we can,
Bob, David just looked it up on the camera for me. They are there. The
They're there, okay.
crosswalks are there.
So,
maybe it's something we could talk with like the PTO or something about to see what we can do to enhance that area, see if we could get
by the
volunteers.
municipalities, at least at the onset of the school year, I believe the fire department goes out just to get everybody reacclimated to now there's kids in the environment. Big problems are school starts and when we go to or from daylight savings. I don't know which is which, when it's dark in the morning, right? That's when, you know, and you're asking a 4th, 5th, or 6th grader potentially to cross, or on the other end of town, it's a challenge. And as long as we're doing everything we can to prevent danger to kids, I just,
Okay.
you know,
I just wanted to bring it up 'cause-
If we had the funding, it would be a no-brainer. It would be everything we could do, but, you know, the community made a decision on what the funding wants to be, so we've got to deal with what we have.
Okay. Let me reach out to the PTO, see what we can, if there's any willingness for them to want to do some kind of program that we can work together on. Okay. Other business, more items. So this is an item for council to discuss. This council is changing over from, there's only going to be 3 of us left. There'll be 4 new council members. There's positions open in design review, zoning, tree, and personnel board of review. Do I have them all?
In the park.
In the parks.
For citizens, we also.
Citizens.
Yes, just the citizens
Just
ones.
citizens, all the
Just-
council ones you're gonna have to change
Just the
anyways.
parks. So it has been the tradition of council that these are filled before the end of the year. Now, I don't think council's ever had this much of a changeover in the past. I don't know. There's never been this much of a changeover. So with that being said, it's this council's responsibility to fill it. But the new council can come in on January 2nd, because all these positions are at the will of council, and change them all to what they want. My thought is that we have interviews and have the current council and the new council interview together and try to come up with a decision that works, so that we're not, this council's not setting one and the new council's ripping it apart or anything like that. And I wanted to get council's thoughts on that, on working together to do this so it's set, since it's unprecedented time for us.
I think the
Pretty
only,
sure when I came on the council, and I would have to look, but when I came onto the council, it was probably the last time that normal elections occurred in the city. We did everything in the first meeting or 2, I think is how they did it. I know at least for most of the committees that they did. Now, we didn't have such a huge turnover, and the committees didn't have much of a turnover either, because I think a lot of people just stayed on.
And I'm just going off what I've been told on, I know the
Yeah.
committees we decide because it's council committees, but for the civilian committees, I was told it was tradition that it's done at the end of the year. So I've never been part of that. It was, Teresa, I think, Marvin, did you shake your head? Yes, that's the way it's been done in the past.
No, it's hadn't been done
Planning and zoning
that way.
has
It's always
been.
been,
Planning and zoning has been.
what, Jason?
Planning and zoning was because they expire at
they
the,
expire on the
It was always
31st.
done at the organizational meeting in January.
committees were,
Yeah, remember the year I was in California?
yeah.
So would council want to work with the new council in doing these interviews and working together, or do you want to do it yourself?
I think you just start off with the new group.
I agree.
Have
Let
the new
them
group handle
decide.
it.
Let the new people.
So our advice is to leave committees with open seats that are gonna receive applications. That's my question. And
So, yeah,
2
we'd have
weeks.
to cancel some
They're not open
meetings.
until December 31st.
Right, but then they're open for the first meeting of the year. You're gonna have blank seats. And you could receive an application that you'd have to review with empty seats. That's what I'm
Well,
asking.
zoning does not meet till the 2nd,
It'd be January 9th.
9th, and council
Yeah.
meets January 2nd. So council would have to fill them on January 2nd to have zoning on January 9th.
Interview and fill.
Yeah, I think you could do that pretty easy. I mean, I know when I got put on zoning originally, I think I got put on and then I had a meeting the next day. And they said, here's your packet, good luck.
Charlie, your thoughts?
I think it's good to let the new group do it, because they're gonna look at it anyway.
Nicole, Bob, and John?
Could be more efficient to do it ahead. I don't think it's detrimental in a significant way to do it later. I'm pretty open to whatever the group wants to do, especially if the new folks get involved with that process early on. It would lighten the load the day of, maybe make people a little more hit the ground running. But the folks that would be appointed if we waited till after the new year would just have to do a little catch up.
And also, they could do the interviews before the end of the year, couldn't they?
If the new council can be available. So our last two meetings of the year are December 5th and December 12th.
Right, which we were going to have to do interviews.
I was setting them up for, excuse me, December 5th, but I can change to whatever you guys want.
There, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
There is one that I would want to get more information on. Teresa, the DRB.
Yeah.
When does that term expire? That's for the, I'm sorry, not DRB.
DRB had
Design review board
one
has
drop
not
off, and then you
expired.
have one that has, you had one drop off, and then you have one term that is expiring. I think that's in January.
And I misspoke, I'm sorry, not the DRB. And it's escaping me at the moment.
Personnel Board of Review.
Yes,
That
Personnel
was-
Board of
That
Review.
was the end of January.
Yep.
That's the end of January.
Middle of
For
January.
why, so why did zoning expire in December?
Everything expires in December. I'm not really sure.
No, because design review board said January. on that.
No,
Yeah, I don't
Design
know
Review
everything.
Board is
I think
December
we
31st.
started from the,
Well,
Can we
maybe it
amend-
was just.
Can we
the
amend all
email
those
that I read,
dates? Can we amend all those dates to the end of January?
So I think the Personnel Board of Review was the middle of January because that's when we started it.
Yeah.
It was started after.
Well,
That's why it was-
That's the only one that I would recommend that you not have a vacancy. Just because you never know when a personnel issue is going to pop up. And I would hate to have the absentee of a member on that board, and all of a sudden we have a personnel situation that board has to vet, and there's only two of them there. So
And that one expires
Well, it-
1/15/24. It's 1/15.
then you should be fine. That's the only one that I have a concern about, having any type of vacancy on the seat, because of, you just, that one's not a scheduled meeting. That's a, hey, we got a situation
That one's.
and we need to have it addressed. Then I gotta call Dave in, and to have only two members, I feel like would handicap that particular board. And that's almost an administrative function rather than a committee function, so.
it's been done both ways. I mean, it just depends on what's, like you said, we've never had this much turnover, so.
You know, you normally, I mean,
Decide.
you don't normally have this much turnover, but you have 3 people coming back, which would be normal on a 4-year.
Yeah, you could have 4 new people.
It's not.
So, Bob, you're indifferent.
I see pluses and minuses to both.
John?
Well, I think some of them you have people that have had. What's the one that somebody's wanted to be on for a long time now? You received somebody for, was it Tree?
Oh, Tree Commission,
Right,
Cindy Duke.
That one we've never interviewed for.
right.
Well, maybe at one time you did, I don't remember, but
What I'm saying is she
I don't think
is
we did.
put her interest in
I
like
think we had.
forever ago.
there wasn't a whole lot of interest. We took anybody that wanted to be on it.
That's-
We did
yeah.
that for the original design review board. We
That's what I
started
mean.
taking interest for that, and then everybody that was originally in dropped out. We had to open the window again. We left that one for 6 months, I think. So that's not unprecedented. I think what you're looking at, and to avoid probably any animosity of decisions, because if you're going to interview with new members, not that there's anything wrong with the new members, but they're not sworn in at that point. So you're bringing them into meetings to make decisions that they're not sworn in to make yet. You're going to muddy the waters. I think it's easier you just do it with a new group.
Okay, so Ryan, Sharon, Charlie's with the new group. Bob's an indifferent. Nicole, John.
I'm indifferent.
I say we just do it January 2nd then.
Okay, so all vacancies, set up interviews for January 2nd.
Yes.
Okay.
Might
we-
be a late meeting for you, Jeff. Just playing ahead.
Do we want to open the deadline for more applicants then?
I would.
Yeah. And just cut off like what, a week or 3 days before or
Cut
whatever?
off on, we're gonna
Just
do
so
it
there's enough time for
second.
Teresa and the staff to
process.
get.
So
Everything ready.
December 15th,
Sure.
close it.
Let's go.
Fair.
Okay. That was all I had for other business.
Don't forget Dirt Mountain.
Yep. I didn't know if council had anything other.
I do.
You did.
There was public other business.
Yep.
I
We're gonna
have
get that. Go ahead.
One is a discussion item. I would like to, if we come to some sort of consensus tonight, look at changing one of our ordinances. It's gonna be 509.031, disturbing the peace. We've had lots of discussion over this here recently. I've looked at other municipalities. Ours currently states the word just church bells. Other municipalities go in the definition of sounds created by church bells or chimes or calls to worship from places of worship. I think that whenever we find something in one of our ordinances that isn't exactly, I think, what was intended at the time that was written, we have the opportunity to make it right. We should probably look at it.
So if I recall from discussion with you, the church bells that are currently in the city right now are a speaker. They're not actually a church bell. Our ordinance only applies to church bells. So we need to amend it to include the speakers, which would not change anything that's going on right now. It would just negate any future issues.
It would allow them to be abiding the ordinance instead of being in violation of the
So
ordinance.
someone could come and say that they're in violation right now because they're a speaker and not a bell. By adding this, it keeps them fine. Electronic?
Electronic device.
Yeah, that's why the one that I read, that I'm suggesting says sounds created by church bells or chimes or calls, which I got 2 other municipalities use that are right around us, and that I talked to them and they said that's why. People don't, obviously historical churches might have those, but they go away.
But are chimes electronic devices like he said? So chimes are actual electronic.
Let's see. We can see
I just want to make sure that we don't say chimes and it counts out the electronic speakers.
I think it would also calls would.
Wouldn't we be better off defining what the violation is, a noise at certain decibel for a certain duration?
That's already in there.
And then it could be everything.
That's already in there.
So then why would we need to specify what the sounds could, are we saying that bells could be louder than the ordinance?
No.
So why do we need to specify what the sounds could be if it's in violation?
We just want to protect the bells.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what it
but-
comes down to.
but
We
he's-
just want to protect the bells,
Well,
right?
he's saying that, excuse me,
Right now they're currently.
John's saying that in addition to the bells.
You already
not-
have the
not an
decibel
reduction.
rating. That's what signifies that if you're making a noise that's louder than the decibel reading, you could be doing something that's legal. You can't sit in your driveway and rev if you have a loud muffler up for 4 hours. You can listen to music in your backyard, but you can't listen to music in your backyard over whatever the decibel reading is. Watch a movie in your backyard, whatever the things are. That's already defined in the ordinance. It's just amending the ordinance to
I'm gonna
that we-
eliminate the source. Doesn't matter what the source noise is. Chainsaw versus bells, if you're loud, you're loud.
They had all the rest of it's in their lawnmowers.
I don't know why we identified any of it.
That's how everybody else rates it too.
So how do we go about amending this, Sean?
You have to read it twice.
You get
He
into,
doesn't like this one. Already.
no.
For a good
I'm
reason.
okay either way. This one's.
All the 2 readings.
This one's in the same realm as you got noise violations, and there's things that cut both ways. I would recommend you sit down with your law director, tell him the intent that you would like to see, the achieved outcome, the goal. Allow him to utilize his expertise to draft something that achieves that goal. Where I could see a situation where you allow speakers, once you allow one institution a speaker, you allow other institutions. And then we get into the tricky games of words of well, what defines a church, what defines an institution. We live in a society that's ever changing, ever evolving, and the definition of what is a church, what is a place of worship, is changing rapidly. So, where
Which is defined
you're-
in the ORC, right?
What's that?
That's defined in the ORC.
I would defer to your legal counsel to make sure that you're not creating a situation where you have unintended consequences to where you thought by doing an action it became unwound, and now you've tied your hands whenever you feel restriction may be necessary. The other piece is, I would say, there is probably some, and I'm not an attorney, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn. So the other piece that I would say is there's got to be some argument that an existing violation that has been in existence for quite some time has some grandfathered ability to it. And I know we're dancing around the specific subject, but I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think we all know what we're talking about. So is it more advantageous to lean on the grandfather clause of that rather than instituting an allowability of it? Again, I would direct you towards your law director to have a very detailed discussion.
Wouldn't we say that you can't use the grandfather argument here because the moment in which they did it, they were in violation of the ordinance that was written, let's see, when we did this one. Just playing the devil's advocate here at the other side. So it would be, so we would be enforcing a grandfather clause that we haven't been enforcing in the ordinance for
Well,
whenever.
the prudent thing with something that has potential to be litigious, as much as this does, is to go through the law director. I mean, that's pretty cut and dry for me. I think we have an agreeable outcome that we're looking for. Even though I thought I thought what you were saying is that you wanted to increase the
No, the language is already in there. Ours currently reads, for disturbing the peace, it mentions church bells.
Okay.
It just calls them bells and
But not as an
church.
exception.
It says exception, noise of safety signals,
Exception.
warnings, devices, emergency pressure relief valves, and church bells.
Okay, so you were referencing the exception of it, and you want to
Yeah.
increase the exceptions.
I wanted to make the exception ring true to what we have now.
So right now, we have an exception because
bells.
it's the,
If they're
the sound
bells, you're
system.
allowed to
I
ring them.
understand.
If
I was
they're
taking your
chimes,
request the other way.
No.
you're not.
Still the same comment, original comment, I think, is this has potential for
Yes.
litigation. We don't want to put ourselves in a position to spend money to defend something because of the language or the process that we decided to go about. We have an attorney. We
So
pay the attorney.
would council be okay that email him tomorrow and say, hey, this is what our goal is?
Well,
How is
I
this
would, I would
possible?
email him and say that we would like to have a discussion of what our goals are.
Okay.
And I don't think we vetted that out all the way.
Okay.
I would,
So have him here next time then.
yeah, and I can do that as
Okay.
staff.
I thought it had
That way
already
you don't get
been
into a
decided.
situation where council members are.
The Presbyterians, I've talked to them, and they don't want to muddy the waters. They're not happy, but they want to,
You might want to talk to them again. Their
So-
council is one of the ones that wants to make sure the language
okay.
So here's,
makes them included in the
Overall, there's a
conversation.
bigger conversation with this though, and I understand what Sean's saying. If you open yourself up to one scenario, you open up yourself up to all scenarios. And you might not get into a situation that you intended to get into, so I think it's.
Yeah, that's what
it's prudent to go
lawyers
with
exist
legal
for,
counsel,
is to
take a
navigate
look at it.
the law, to get the benefit of their client.
so what John pointed out to me, Ms. Hendren, is that they've come to an agreement, they've got the agreement, now someone else can come and say, hey, they're in violation because it's not a bell, it's a sound system, so cut it off. We're trying to say, let's protect what they have at the decibel they have.
Protecting it, okay.
Yeah.
That's accurate?
If we so choose.
Yes. Okay. So just have him come next time.
Second is, can we look into, I'll walk through this in the easiest way possible. So, if we use Pulte for an example, or any other building, right, the people that are working down here, you could use that, or the siding. When the winter comes, they're gonna get a conditional occupancy because they cannot close on a loan without conditional occupancy. Okay? Which means that they will be things that can forego. I don't know what our zoning person lets them do or not do, right? Maybe they say you can't do asphalt in the winter. It's impossible, right? We can all agree on that. So if we don't have a metric for us requiring them to bond, we should look into it.
Well, I'll go back to this, and that is bonding. A performance bond is for infrastructure that we are going to have to replace no matter what. So, and I get where you're going, but I would, and I'm playing the devil's advocate and not trying to be argumentative.
I can bring more information next time if you want, where the city of New Albany does it, the city of Dublin does it,
What I'm saying
the
is
city of Westerville does
if it's
it,
in city violation, it doesn't matter if it's
but it's not on the homeowner. That's
homeowners should do their due diligence before purchasing a situation that's in violation.
Well,
right. But so what
If it has
happens?
a gravel, that's
So what happens here and what most people don't understand is you think that when you hire a contractor that they are required to finish their job, and as soon as they walk away from you and you have a permit, you are required to finish the work whether you paid them or not. So this is a tool that the city can use to protect our citizens at the best that we can so that we don't have to go back to them and say, hey, I know these people didn't do this, but you're on the hook for it, so get it done.
But you're asking for a performance bond on private property. Is the issue that I don't think is outside the realm, but it's different.
If we don't
than-
give them,
Can I-
Yeah, but
can
your
I just give an
permit's not
example
closed. Your
of
permit's not
something
closed, so it's not on
that happened
private property.
last year? So Green Acres, it might have been a little over a year ago. Green Acres behind, in Leafy Dell there. And I don't know what this, if there was violations, I have no idea. I wasn't on council at the time. I wasn't privy to any of that. So there were quite a few pieces of property behind there that were not graded for a long time. There were no, I'm talking about, no gravel. The catch basins were out exposed for probably a good year. And I know that property owners who were in between this crap going on, there were puddles of water, weeds, and they had to spray. They had to pay extra money to have their yards sprayed for ticks and fleas and mosquitoes and
They didn't
stuff.
have yards.
They didn't have. It wasn't even graded.
They
That wasn't even
should've had an
graded.
occupancy permit was
And
the
that's
thing.
but
They
they were.
should've
But that's
never
the
given
thing
the
is that they were granted an occupancy permit because there were
Yeah.
people living there, and I don't want to see that happen in the future because as I walk the neighborhood, I mean, I felt so bad for those people, but I don't know what their recourse was.
So that's a performance bond on
The
infrastructure
city
that
forced
the
them to come in
city
and brush on.
takes over because that's engineering.
Gotcha.
So that's engineering. Those are storm structures, my assumption would be, and Jack and I walked through this with Green Acres, Fletiga Field. Unfortunately, there's no performance bond up there.
That was Golden Pond.
Golden Pond.
Well, that one it
No,
was.
this
This was
happened on-
green. This was Green
yeah,
Acres.
this happened
Yeah.
on Green
This was Green Acres.
So
Yeah.
any type of storm sewer or grading, that's an engineering specification that has to be met. And we do require typically a performance bond on those situations.
Okay.
John's really specifying
Okay.
on
Anything that we do a
driveway
permit,
versus.
anything we do a permit on, that gets a conditional occupancy or, so you go for anything that's a conditional occupancy or a conditional final building, because it's a non-occupiable space. Just because I know that as a lot of other cities take the same recourse because, so like when I go and do building inspections, before I sign off on a final occupancy, I do it pending zoning and engineering, so that the zoning, they can't get an occupancy without the zoning being done. So in the wintertime,
Right.
the zoning inspector can then sign it for conditional occupancy pending, seed, whatever, sod, whatever it is, whatever the requirements to get it done are, and then we can require them to bond, which we don't in the city that I work for, but a lot of other cities do, require them to hold a bond amount over that property. So if they end up leaving and never coming back, the homeowner isn't stuck with it.
And I'll go back to, and if you want to write a template,
Yeah.
a standard template, that's fine. But in the conditional, in the very definition of it's a conditional approval, you could put in the condition.
You have to
anything
put the
you want.
conditions in.
And you could say, we're going to grant this occupancy conditional upon a performance bond.
Okay.
Much
Correct.
like we did with this. If you want to have a standard template put in place, that's fine, and I'm okay
No,
with
I'm not
that.
talking about an ordinance. I'm just talking about a standard operating procedure for us as a city going forward, that we require people to do it.
I think if it's going to be a standard operating procedure, you need to codify it. That way it's enforceable by this body from a conditional standpoint, that any conditional occupancy permit has to have some type of performance bond to make sure that the work is going to get done. I can get on board with that, but if it's just us requiring the developer in a broad spectrum to put a performance bond on all driveways, I think that's overstretching
No,
and
just
making
case by
it more complicated than it needs to be, because there may not be a conditional situation.
Winter,
Yeah, case by
winter
case.
seems to be the tough
Winter's
time.
always the worst one.
Because the ones with Green Acres, that was because of winter time. I think it had something to do with
It went way into the summer. No, it
Well,
was.
no, when it got done, but the approval happened, I think, in the wintertime because they said it was too late in the season to finish the project.
See, but that's
So
not
they
true
got-
because when my house was built
Yeah.
on Weeping Willow, that was not true. I had grass laid, I had it graded and everything, and I didn't move until December. So that, I don't agree with
From
that. I don't know
from
what
Jim
happened,
told
but
me, I think it was what Jim told me because I asked because I mowed like a property next door and I got that question a bunch.
Mm-hmm. I just don't want that to happen
Yeah.
again. Because
Can
it was
we check
awful.
with-
It
'cause they had
put
to brush
undue-
to find
it
out
put
if
undue
there's
crap
any
on another,
repercussions.
I would
on
recommend
homeowners
going
that
through
already live there.
Yeah.
KSK.
I don't want
No,
people
I'm with you. I'm with
people
you.
to do that.
Yeah, I would recommend, MKSK's dove into this field
Okay.
a number of times, so I would recommend getting a recommendation from them if that's the intent that you want to walk through. And I don't want to vet it too far here. I want to be respectful of the rules Bob always mentions, and I'll take a page out of Bob's book. And that's, if you spend more than 2 minutes on it, probably ought to go to a committee.
Yeah.
And then it gets vetted at council rather than having these pretty in detailed discussions. So I'll get in trouble later on from you all, but.
Nope, this is general, or this is other business, so we're kind of a free flow. Was that all you had, John?
Send it to legal and then send it to zoning.
Anyone over here with other business? Bob, Nicole? Sharon, Ryan? Okay, Mr. Block, you had something?
I was asking about the lot out on 62 across from McDonald's, what the situation is for that lot. That lot, and all that dirt's stacked up there. If we get one of those gully washers, an inch and a half, 2 inches of rain, we have gotten to Johnstown in the past. That mud's gonna be right down into the creek, down into where we've got our sanitary sewer. What's it gonna do to Johnstown? If they don't get something done?
Did you start to do research on that?
Yeah, so we had the same question.
It's gonna be an EPA issue, isn't it?
Called EPA 4 times.
They haven't come out?
They ordered it out 5 foot, and didn't finish it up.
Yeah, they, from what I've heard, the EPA has came out. They have required the property owner to put in the appropriate silt fences due to the calls that Mr. Block has put in,
Panama
maybe
Creek.
some other individuals. We also followed up and had questions when we saw this dirt mound starting to appear. In the past, obviously that site has had work done to it for a number of years, and it's continued to be that way. I did have at least a beginning discussion with the property owner, and I said, what has been allowable in the past is no longer going to be allowable moving forward. This does not meet our requirements from a Title 13 of your code. Any soil disturbance has to have a whole plan that's associated with it, has to have a SWIP with the state of Ohio, with the EPA. And I said, you have done your last dirt dozer push around. So whatever you're doing, you may want to wrap up in rapid order, because the next time you're not going to be met with no resistance. It is going to be a very different dialogue. It's in our codified ordinances. It will be enforced. So that's where we left it. That was probably about a month ago. I've seen no activity on that property since. So I don't know if their intent is to leave it that way. I am of your opinion as well. I don't think it can be kept that way. And if they do, then they're going to have to silt fence the living daylights out of it, because
seed it.
until they get some seed. And that was a conversation that I had with the developer or the property owner was, my God, please get some seed down.
Is there a purpose that they're doing this?
Storage.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Storage.
There's a lot in there, and I would hesitate to get into too much discussion, because if we did
Illegal.
get into a legal.
I just didn't know if there was an open
I
that
don't
they
wanna-
were gonna do.
I don't want this council meeting to be reflective and pulled up in some type of minutes for a legal argument. I just want to convey direct conversations that I have had with them, and I want to quote our ordinance that what has happened in the past is in violation, and we won't start enforcing that moving forward. I will continue to find out what the game plan is on this mound and see if there is a plan of action in the near term, and also get with a variety of options to see if we can go down that SWIP. That's where I'll leave it.
Okay.
Again, when you have a developer that's doing that stuff, then when the development's over and they move away, Johnstown's left with the problem.
And that's hopefully with this new temporary use.
That $20,000 protection.
No, oh my God, no.
No,
That
not
would
that
be a
one.
That's our
nightmare.
new gateway to Johnstown.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, the other concern I have with that is obviously we have a sewer easement running through there that can't be covered, and I've often wondered if that is encroaching on the floodplain the way it is.
It was directly communicated with a heavy emphasis that no dirt shall be pushed over the side. And as soon as dirt is pushed over the side, the Army Corps of Engineers will be called, and they will be notified, and you'll be filling in a floodplain. And there are appropriate measures and steps that you can go through, much like Chase Bank did. However, you have not submitted any of that, and until we see proof, we are going to adamantly push back against any of that. And it was a good conversation. It's from an awareness standpoint. I'm hopeful that there was a lot of processing and a lot of reflection, and maybe some awareness of what is now the new expectation moving forward. But absolutely 100% cannot push dirt over the side, I said, if I see a boulder go over, and the comment back was, if we have a boulder go over, we have been instructed by the EPA that we need to go out and get it. And I said, great, we're all on the same page. So,
Well, I just was told by the street department, of course, Dan is now gone, so I've got to do my due diligence and investigate where we're at there. The silt fence is actually set up on top of the sanitary sewer easement, which that should not be.
and they're not gonna push the dirt to the silt fence. The silt fence, it was a requirement from the EPA, to Marvin's point, that if we get a gully washer,
That's not-
I'm gonna use that name tonight.
That's a-
Make sure you
But
try
I
it.
think the silt fence should be on their property.
It
Or
is.
is the easement their, you know, we have.
It is on their property. The silt fence is on their property. They own the entirety of that area down there.
Well,
We
if you-
have an easement, but they're
Yeah.
allowed to put a silt fence on.
If
our
you think about
Okay.
home developments, they put the silt fences on the very edge, which would be in the easements to catch any dirt coming off. It's not actually on the residential property, but that's what I'm thinking.
No, I think the silt fence is on the
Is it?
property that the house is being built on.
Well, the other piece of that is,
Pretty
we're not gonna get any grass seed.
I can tell you a real world example. If you,
Put straw wattles down.
down in Amesville, Ohio, which is outside of Athens, big water comes through, hay bale, big round one, washed into the creek. And they had to go get it. But you know what you can't do when it's pouring rain and flooding? Get machinery into soaking wet ground and actually do something. So I think if we get into a situation, the requirement to correct it, we're gonna fill it with water down there. So I'd like to see corrective action sooner than later. Certainly before we get into the spring, when we get into the heavy rain season.
Can we find out what our options are to enforce?
That's what I'm gonna work through. And God, as everything is complicated, and I wish it wasn't. There is a precedent that was set there. This has been allowed. All of a sudden, we're coming in and saying, I think it's safe to say all activities ceased. We can probably move forward, but I mean, that site has been a dirt mound of some sorts over the last 20 years. So
Was it effectively allowed, or was it just mismanaged?
I'd say both. We didn't have Title 13 in place until just recently. So Title 13 would have been the trigger that would have said, you're disturbing any more than 1 acre on a site, you have to go through these proper procedures. There wasn't a particular use that was happening on the site. So from a zoning standpoint, there's nothing happening there that's in violation of a use. It's just they're filling a lot. Now, from a development process, that goes to that Title 13, and that's the SWIP and all the other provisions that apply. That is something that has been instituted as of recently, within the last 3 to 4 years. That has not been enforced on that particular property. But when is the beginning and when is the end of when that happened? And that's why I think the call to the property owner, letting them know the clock is done, and now is the new reset. And so moving forward, you will need to go through these.
Is that property even developable with, I don't know, that depth of loose soil?
You can dig caissons deep, brother, so.
Well, like Sean said, it's not this council's fault or Sean's fault this has happened. It's happened over a 20-year period.
Sure.
It's just escalated.
I'm just looking for an
Can it be
exit
developed in the
strategy.
future?
How do we limit our exposure to massive problems?
If you want, I can also vet this to legal. My God, you're gonna put their kids through college. No, and I've been trying to refrain because we're doing really good budget-wise, and we're utilizing those sources towards, I think, things that have an ROI. Anyhow.
Well, what's our risk assessment? Do we have a 50% chance of problems? Do we have a 20%? Do we have an 80%?
Do you want me to try to mitigate it internally with the property owner first?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
We'd love
Instead of
to.
introducing
I don't want
legal,
it, I don't want it to be adversarial, but
let me try to go through that and see if, I thought I was there a month ago when I had the conversation. They wanted me to put some things in writing. I said, not gonna happen. We can have a verbal conversation. And that never transpired. I was hoping to have some grass seed down and some conditions of that site be improved. That didn't happen. So maybe another reach out, say, hey, this is the next step. And then if I can't get any direction there, then I'll introduce legal and get some clarification as to what maybe we should.
if the situation requires it. But I have no ability to judge the stability of a dirt hill. Zero. So if it's stable and it's okay,
Be fun to slide on.
we don't need to spend a bunch of money. But if we're looking at a 75% chance of failure of the wall and it's sliding down the hill, there is no recovery that'll happen quick enough, because the conditions that will cause it will be the conditions that will be making it impossible to clean it up until all the water goes wherever it wants.
And we only have as much teeth as the EPA will allow. So they usually dictate on a 100-year rainfall, but that's not for, they don't always look at the gully washers. Just gonna keep using that happen. They look at the average. So from an enforcement standpoint, I can only push as far as what our EPA guidelines in the state of
If
Ohio.
you could just talk to him, see where we can go from
See
there.
where we can go. You know, let's
We
start
get
with the
100-year flood
conversation.
events here
Every year
every
now.
year lately.
I don't disagree with that.
So one last item, this is something you guys, we have to decide. There were some changes to the compensation agreement with the school, between the school and us. They appear to be minor. It's up to council if you guys want to do it in executive session or do an open session. What was your thought, Sean?
I'll just give you a little bit of background, and then you guys can make a decision. Earlier today, and I have not had a chance to put eyes on it, but just from communication I've had with Yaz and the school district, they've recommended some clerical errors that exist, as well as some additional wording. The content and the intent of the document has stayed the same from the discussions I've had with our law director, as well as this superintendent. I have full confidence and trust in both of them that they would not steer us in the wrong direction. So, and I'll give you some references, and that is, I think in Phil Wagner's name, they had an extra L. So if you get where I'm going, school board president was referenced as school board president in one, and then just president in the other. So some of these cleanup items that exist, the way you all passed the legislation, and I did get with Yaz on this, and this was actually his comment back to me, because my concern was if this document changes, does it need to go back through the ordinance process that was set forth before? He said Thad was very aware of the fluidity of the contract, and that it hadn't gotten completely across the finish line at the school. So whenever you passed your ordinance, you passed it in a way that does allow the city manager to add or remove some additional provisions, as long as the content and the intent stays the same, knowing that there would be some verbiage edits that need to be made. So I can put eyes on that. I can send that out to you. If that falls within that category of just some nuances needing to be added or subtracted, you do not have to pass any legislation. You've already passed the legislation authorizing me to rework and be agreeable to that, and then sign that document. The school would like to get this passed in the near future. I think this is a great win. But to be respectful of their timelines, I need to give them pretty quick feedback by tomorrow. And that's where I'll leave it. I haven't had, like I said, an opportunity to go through it line by line. I'm just going off of what Yaz has given me, as well as the super.
I think if our attorney has said there's nothing structural change with it, like it changes the intent.
There's some wording that strengthens a piece of it. That it's intended to be in perpetuity, but they added some words just to make sure that it stated that a little bit stronger. But it doesn't change the actual agreeability of the document that you all agreed to. The terms are the same, things like that. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Sean does an excellent job whenever there's an opportunity for him to take something on his shoulders that he's not certain that the council is agreeable to. I assume this follows tracks with you, so I'm confident in the fact that if there was anything that was askew, you would be looking for confirmation at a minimum from us and a vote if it was significant. So I'm comfortable with it.
I am too.
You too?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Campbell? Okay.
okay.
As long as it's just grammatical,
Yeah.
you know.
That's what's been relayed to me. Like I said,
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to put eyes on it. There was some grammatical, as well as, like I said, that the most complicated piece is going to be that rewording of some things to tighten it up. But what Yaz was telling me was the intent is still what council wanted. It's just a different way of wording it that probably locks it in a way that, in some ways, is going to be more reflective of what you wanted. So
The only thing that concerns me is the speed with which some of these things come to us. And I know when we voted on it,
Tell me about it.
when we voted on it, we were receiving information the day before, and I think maybe early
The
that
day of.
morning of. And then we have changes now, and I'm wondering why we're not seeing more fleshed out, completed documents before we vote on them.
You're getting them literally hours after I've received them. I'd like to think government works at the speed of business, but that's not always the case. But I can say this particular situation, it seems like we're probably somewhat in the realm of operating at the speed of business.
I think things are going to start slowing down with that since we've got everything set now. That we
Yeah.
shouldn't be getting,
I got the email from Yaz earlier today. I'm calling him on my way to another meeting. He's debriefing me. I get back to the office and have a committee meeting with you all. I still haven't had time to unpack the email, so I'm counting on the direction and the verbiage that he's
if
giving.
there's anything of substance to change, you'll come to
Yeah,
council.
we have your assurance that if you see something
I'll forward you the email, and if you want to chime in, you're more
that you're
than
not
welcome.
comfortable with,
Okay, that's
That
fine.
would be better. I
Only
agree.
2 or 3 council members chime in. I don't
Right.
need a round robin
Yeah.
sunshine law violation.
Yep.
504.
What's that?
504.
504. There you go.
Okay, anything else tonight? Hearing none, I make a motion that we adjourn.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
8:30.